Someone accuses you of something at work. Maybe it's unfair. Maybe it's partially true. Maybe it's completely fabricated. Doesn't matter. Your gut fires immediately. You know what it tells you to do. Defend yourself. Explain. Clarify. Lay out the facts. Build your case. Because that's what you were taught. That's what honest people do, right? If you're innocent, you say so. If someone misrepresents you, you correct the record. You mount your defense, and reasonable people will see the truth. Except that's not what happens. That is almost never what happens. And Machiavelli saw this 500 years ago. He watched princes, generals, popes, and diplomats make this exact mistake over and over. And he wrote it down so plainly that it's almost insulting how few people actually understand it. The moment you defend yourself, you have already lost. Not because your defense is wrong, but because the defense itself is the wrong move entirely. You walked into a game you didn't even realize you were playing, and you played it on someone else's terms. Today, I'm going to walk you through something that Machiavelli understood about power that most people never figure out in their entire lives. And once you see it, I promise you, you cannot unsee it. Let's start with why your instinct to defend feels so right. Because it does feel right. It feels logical, it feels moral, it feels like the obvious thing to do. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Machiavelli wrote something in chapter 15 of The Prince that, if you really sit with it, will change how you see every interaction you've ever had. He said, "How we live is so different from how we ought to live, that he who studies what ought to be done rather than what is done will learn the way to his downfall rather than to his preservation." Read that again in your mind. He's saying that the gap between how the world should work and how it actually works is the gap where people destroy themselves. And defending yourself lives right in the center of that gap. Here's what nobody tells you. You were given a social contract as a child. The contract says, if someone accuses you of something untrue, you present the facts, and fair-minded people will update their assessment. That contract works in a courtroom. Sometimes, it works in a philosophy classroom. Maybe. It almost never works in the places where your life actually happens. In meetings, in social circles, in negotiations, in the dynamics that determine whether you rise or get crushed. In those arenas, the social contract is a fairy tale, and the people who still believe in it are the ones getting outmaneuvered by people who don't. Here's why. When someone accuses you of something, they have already set the frame. The frame is, this person has a case to answer. That's the frame. And the moment you answer it, you have accepted their frame. You are now operating inside their reality. You are responding to their narrative, on their timeline, using their terms. You are playing defense on their court. And here's the thing about playing defense on someone else's court. Even if you win the point, you've already conceded the position. Think about this. When a CEO goes on camera to address allegations, what happens? Does the story die? Does everyone say, well, and he explained himself, case closed? No. The story doubles. The news cycle intensifies because the defense becomes the story. CEO denies wrongdoing is a bigger headline than the original accusation ever was. The defense didn't kill the narrative. The defense fed it oxygen. The defense gave it a second life. Now think about the CEOs who actually survive crises. They're almost never the ones who explained themselves the best. They're the ones who changed the subject most effectively, or who were so strategically positioned that the accusation couldn't gain traction in the first place. They didn't play defense. They made defense unnecessary. This is the part that changes everything, and it comes directly from Machiavelli. Chapter 18 of The Prince. One of the most devastating observations about human nature ever committed to paper. He wrote, "Men in general judge more by the sense of sight than by the sense of touch, because everyone can see, but few can test by feeling. Everyone sees what you seem to be. Few know what you really are. And those few do not dare take a stand against the general opinion." Let that land. He's telling you that the world does not operate on truth. It operates on perception. People don't investigate. They don't weigh evidence. They don't dig into the substance of what happened. They look at the surface and they decide. And the few people who actually do know the truth, the ones who could vouch for you, who could set the record straight, they won't. Because they won't risk their own position to challenge what the crowd has already decided. You are alone in your truth. And Machiavelli is telling you that truth is not enough. He doubled down on this in the same chapter. He said, "The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar." Now, he doesn't mean vulgar as in crude. He means ordinary. He means the vast majority of people who judge by surface, by optics, by energy. Not because they're stupid, because they don't have the time, the interest, or the incentive to go deeper. They see you react, and that reaction tells them everything they think they need to know. So what happens when you defend yourself? You're speaking to the tiny minority who might actually weigh the evidence. But the crowd, the people whose perception actually determines your position, they've already decided. They didn't hear your words. They read your energy. And your energy said, "I'm threatened." Your body language shifted. Your posture got smaller. Your speech got faster. You started qualifying, over-explaining, adding caveats. The room didn't process your argument. The room processed your anxiety. And they filed it under weakness. Think about every powerful person you've ever observed in a conflict. A real conflict, with real stakes. Did they rush to explain? Did they fire off a long email laying out their side? Did they call everyone in their circle to clarify the situation? No. They were still. They let it pass. Or they struck back. But they never defended, because they understood something that most people will never understand. In power dynamics, the person who is secure does not explain. Let me give you a scenario you'll recognize. Someone spreads a rumor about you in your social circle. You hear about it through a friend. Your gut screams at you to call everyone, explain your side, set the record straight, prove it's not true. So you do that. And what actually happens? Now the rumor has your energy behind it. You amplified it. The people who hadn't heard it now have, because you brought it to them. The people who had heard it now think, there must be something to this, because look how worked up they are. Your defense didn't kill the rumor. Your defense marketed it. Now imagine you said nothing. The rumor sits there with no fuel. It starves. And if someone brings it to you directly, you don't defend. You dismiss. Not with an argument. With indifference. That's interesting. Anyway, that indifference is the rebuttal. That indifference communicates something that no defense ever could. This accusation is so far beneath my reality that engaging with it would be a waste of my time. That's the message the room receives, not through your words, but through your energy. Now let me take you deeper, because this is where Machiavelli gets truly brilliant. Chapter 18. Of the Prince, the Fox, and the Lion. Most people know this one, but almost nobody understands the half of it that actually matters. He wrote, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." People hear this, and they think it means be strong and be clever. That's the surface reading. Here's the reading that changes how you operate. The lion cannot protect himself from traps. Think about that. The lion is raw strength. The lion charges, The lion fights head-on, and the lion walks directly into snares because he doesn't recognize them for what they are. A vigorous defense is the lion's move. It's pure force directed at a problem that force cannot solve. An accusation is not a battlefield. An accusation is a trap. And when you charge into it with your defense, with your evidence, with your righteous explanation, you are the lion walking into the net. The fox sees differently. The fox looks at the accusation and doesn't see something to fight. The fox sees the mechanism. The fox sees the binary that's been set up. Deny it and look like you're hiding something, or admit it and confirm it. Both options are inside the trap. Both options lose. And most people, because they were never taught to think like this, thought will pick one of those two losing options every single time. The fox takes the third option, the one most people don't even see. Refuse the binary entirely. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. 3 situations you will absolutely encounter. First, you're in a meeting, and someone hits you with a loaded question. So are you saying the delay was your team's fault, or that you just didn't plan properly? Both answers lose. If you pick the first one, you've thrown your team under the bus. If you pick the second, you've admitted incompetence. The fox doesn't pick either. The fox says, "Let me walk you through where we are and what's next." You didn't accept the frame. You didn't answer their question. You redirected to your frame. And the room barely notices, because most people don't realize a trap was set in the first place. Second, someone calls you out publicly. Social media, a group setting, in front of peers. The crowd is watching. The temptation to defend is almost unbearable because there's an audience. The fox says, "I see this differently, but I'd rather show you over the next few weeks than argue about it now." No defense, no engagement with the accusation, just forward motion. And the audience, whether they realize it or not, reads composure. They read strength. They read someone who isn't rattled. Third, a personal confrontation. Someone in your life accuses you of something. Maybe there's emotion behind it. The instinct to deny is powerful. The fox doesn't deny. The fox doesn't confirm. The fox redirects to the real dynamic. What's really going on here? Because this doesn't seem like it's about what you're saying. It's about. That response does something remarkable. It takes you out of the defendant's chair and puts you in the analyst's chair. You're no longer answering the accusation. You're examining it. That shift in position is everything. Here's a real-world example that almost everyone can relate to. A job interview. The interviewer asks, "Why did you leave your last position?" This is a trap disguised as a friendly question. If you defend, if you say, "Well, my boss was difficult, and the culture was toxic, and they didn't appreciate my contributions," you just told them 3 things. You're a complainer, you can't navigate difficult environments, and you blame others when things don't work out. That's what they heard. Not what you said. What they heard. The fox moves differently. I did strong work there, and I'm now looking for an opportunity where I can do this specific thing, which is exactly why I'm sitting here. You acknowledged nothing. You defended nothing. You explained nothing. You redirected to the future and made yourself the answer to their problem instead of the defendant in a case. If you're still here, you're not like most people. Most people clicked away the moment this started getting uncomfortable, because this information challenges the story they tell themselves about how the world works. They want to believe that truth wins, that explaining yourself is noble, that if you're right, then surely people will see it. This channel isn't for them. This channel is for people who want to understand the game as it is, not as they wish it were. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper, because what I'm about to tell you is the part most people never learn. Machiavelli wrote in chapter 19 of The Prince that a leader is despised when he appears changeable, foolish, weak, mean, and uncertain. He said a prince should try in his actions to show greatness, courage, seriousness, and strength. Now here's the insight most people miss completely. He's not saying never be uncertain. He's saying never appear uncertain. There's a massive difference between those two things. You can be unsure internally while projecting total composure externally. That composure is not dishonesty. That composure is strategy. And that composure is power. Here's what happens when you defend yourself, mapped against what Machiavelli just told you. Before the defense, observers are uncertain. They're thinking, maybe the accusation is true, or maybe it's not. They don't know. That ambiguity is actually working in your favor, because in the absence of information, people tend to project their existing impression of you. If they respect you, they'll lean toward doubting the accusation. If they're neutral, they'll wait and see. The ambiguity is your ally. Now you defend. And watch what happens to the ambiguity. It vanishes. The room shifts from, maybe it's true, maybe not, to, they're clearly worried about this, so there's probably something to it. You just collapsed productive uncertainty into confirmed weakness. You traded a strategic advantage for the emotional comfort of having your say. And that trade, every single time, is a losing trade. And strategic silence operates on a principle that most people will never understand, because it's counterintuitive. Other people fill silences with their own projections, and those projections almost always favor the silent party. When you say nothing, people project strength, composure, superiority, and confidence onto you. They do it automatically. It's a psychological reflex. But when you defend, when you explain, when you justify, you replace those flattering projections with actual data. And the actual data, the defensive body language, the anxious tone, the over-explanation, almost always makes you look worse than the silence did. Think about the person in your life, your organization, your family, your social circle. Who carries the most quiet authority? Picture them right now. Do they explain themselves? When someone challenges them, do they launch into a justification? No. They might raise an eyebrow. They might give a single short response. But they never spiral into defense. And that restraint is precisely what makes them formidable. Not because they don't care. Not because they're passive. But because they understand that their composure communicates more authority than any explanation ever could. I want to be clear about something. This is not passivity. This is not rolling over. This is not letting people walk on you. There is an enormous difference between someone who is silent because they are weak and someone who is silent because they are calculating. The room can feel that difference. One person is frozen. The other is choosing. And choice, visible choice, is the essence of power. You see this in negotiation constantly. There's a well-known principle. The person who speaks first after a number is put on the table usually loses. Why? Because speaking is defending. You're defending against the discomfort of silence. You're defending against the tension of the moment. And the person sitting across from you, the one who lets the number breathe, who doesn't rush to justify or modify or backtrack, they hold the power position. Not because their number was better, because their composure told the room that they believe in their position enough to let it stand without support. That same principle applies to every accusation, every challenge, every confrontation you will ever face. Watch seasoned political operators versus newcomers during a scandal. The newcomer writes a 5-paragraph statement explaining everything, point by point, and responding to every allegation, clarifying every detail, and the statement becomes the story. The media picks it apart. The public reads it as guilt. The defense consumed them. The veteran does something completely different. The veteran says nothing for 48 hours. Lets proxies shape the narrative. Lets the news cycle spin. And then emerges not with a defense, but with a counter-narrative that has nothing to do with the original accusation. A new initiative, a bold move, a forward action. The newcomer defended, the veteran repositioned, and the veteran is still standing while the newcomer is writing their memoir about what went wrong. So what do you actually do? Because I don't believe in theory without application. If you can't use it tomorrow morning, it's just philosophy. And Machiavelli didn't write philosophy. And he wrote field manuals. In the Discourses on Livy, he made an observation that frames everything I'm about to tell you. He said that men rise from one ambition to another. First, they seek to secure themselves against attack, and then they attack others. The critical word there is then. The defensive posture is supposed to be temporary. It's the starting position, not the permanent one. The people who only ever defend, who spend their entire lives reacting to accusations and managing other people's perceptions and explaining themselves, they never graduate to offense. They never move to the second phase. They stay pinned down indefinitely by a game that was designed to keep them pinned down. Here's your playbook. 4 moves. Practice them until they're reflexive. First, the redirect. This is your most versatile tool. When someone accuses you or challenges you, do not address the accusation directly. Change the frame. Move the conversation to the bigger picture, the future, or the accuser's actual motivation. At work, this sounds like, I appreciate the feedback. Let me show you what we're building toward. In your personal life, it sounds like, I hear you, but I think the real conversation here is about something deeper. In public, you ignore the specific claim entirely and speak to what you stand for, not what you're being accused of. You're not dodging, you're steering. There's a difference, and the room respects the person who steers. Second, the dismissal. Use this when the accusation is clearly a power play, when someone is trying to put you on your heels to elevate themselves, while you treat the accusation as so beneath you that engaging with it would be undignified. This only works if your overall positioning supports it, if people already see you as competent and composed. It sounds like nothing, literally nothing. A slight smile, a change of subject, or at most, 5 words. I'm not going to dignify that. And then you move on as if it never happened. The crowd follows your energy. If you treat it as nothing, they treat it as nothing. Third, the advance. This is for situations where you have leverage. Instead of defending your position, reinforce it through action. Someone questions your competence? Don't argue. Ship the project. Close the deal. Produce the result. Let the result be the only statement you make. Results are the most powerful defense that isn't a defense, because a result doesn't explain. A result doesn't justify. A result simply exists, and its existence makes the accusation irrelevant without ever acknowledging it. Fourth, and this is the advanced move, the strategic concession. In rare cases, you concede the smallest possible point to kill the larger narrative. It sounds like, you're right. I could have communicated that better. Here's what's happening next. You gave them a small win. They feel heard. Their emotional need to be acknowledged has been met. But notice what you didn't do. You never engaged with the core accusation. You gave them a pebble so they'd stop looking for the boulder. And then you redirected to your agenda. This move requires precision, because if you concede too much, you've confirmed the accusation. But done correctly, it's devastating, because it combines apparent humility with total control of the narrative. Let me bring this home, because everything I've walked you through today comes back to a single insight that Machiavelli understood, and that most people refuse to accept. The world is a theater of perception. It is not a courtroom of truth. You were raised inside a story that says, if you're right and you can prove it, you win. If you're honest and transparent, people will respect you. If you defend yourself with facts and logic, reasonable people will see the light. That story is comfortable. That story is moral. And that story will keep you losing for the rest of your life if you don't see it for what it is. A control mechanism designed by people who benefit from your compliance. The person who defends is saying something very specific to the room, whether they realize it or not. They're saying, your opinion of me matters so much that I will abandon my forward momentum to manage it. That is a declaration of dependence. That is handing someone else the power to define you. The person who refuses to defend is saying something entirely different. They're saying, I decide what I am. You can think what you want. That is sovereignty. That is the posture of someone who cannot be controlled, because the primary mechanism of control, the accusation, the challenge, the loaded question, no longer has a grip on them. Be the fox, not the lion. When someone sets a trap for you, and they will, because that is the nature of the game you are in, whether you chose to play it or not, remember what Machiavelli taught you. Don't be the lion who sees a threat and charges at it with everything he has, by all that force aimed directly into the net. Be the fox who sees the mechanism for what it is, steps around it, and keeps moving toward the thing he was building before the distraction ever appeared. The moment you defend, you've told the room you can be rattled. And a person who can be rattled can be controlled. Don't give them that. Not ever. If this reframed how you think about conflict and positioning, subscribe. We're going deeper into Machiavelli's playbook next week. I'll see you then.